Hi there. This is the look-see for August 15th, 2024. I know it's a day late, but it's the best I could do after travel. So this past month was really quite tumultuous for everyone. And this look-see is a little bit longer than usual because I have much to share. And also, I left out a bunch of things that I thought were obvious that you could get on YouTube. But I've deliberately kept a little bit quieter than usual the last month or two because I didn't want to add to the noise. A lot of noise out there right now. I was also traveling, speaking, and teaching a good part of the time. So the look-see, for those who haven't heard this before, is a combination of news, commentary, and a bit of clairvoyant assessment, just to keep a finger on the pulse of what's happening in the world and the things that we would do well to think deeply about or find ways around them. So let's begin. Number one, I did a bit of traveling across the country this month, and everywhere I went, the roads were closed for construction. Detours were everywhere. And this is particularly true in my area of Southwest Michigan. The town I live in has no main street at all right now. It has been dug up for months. I got lost in Kalamazoo back in June and could not get out of one of the neighborhoods because everywhere I tried to turn, the street was closed for so-called repairs. Then, on my way home from Albuquerque, I was driving up I-57 in Illinois. I exited onto Illinois 24 in order to cut over to I-65 and continue on north. 20 minutes down Illinois 24, the road was closed. Several weeks earlier, when I was headed west on Illinois 24, there was nothing wrong with that road. So why was it closed? Anyway, a detour sign said, turn here. So I did. And then I followed the navigation prompts that were rerouting me or trying to. And a half hour later, I was completely lost in a maze of corn on a single lane, extremely dusty two-track through a cornfield with corn so high that I couldn't see anything else in any direction. I eventually got to a real road where I passed 4 motorcycles, a maroon-colored car, and a white truck. A few turns later, I was at a stop sign when I saw the 4 motorcycles go by again. A couple more turns, and there was the maroon-colored car and the white truck, and several more vehicles as well. I began to notice that there were quite a few cars and trucks running along the roads through the corn. And then again, there was the maroon-colored car going in another direction. I realized that I was not the only one driving in circles through the corn. At that point, I turned off the navigation, stopped trying to follow the detour signs, and just headed east. I found a road that had a sign saying to I-65, but shortly found that that road was also closed. When I got to I-65, the access ramp to it was closed. I headed north to the next entrance ramp, fingers crossed, and was finally able to get on it and head north again. However, when it was time to exit onto I-94 near Gary, Indiana, that was closed, and I was rerouted onto I-8090. This led into a massive backup that took 3 hours to get out of. And I share all of this because I've had the feeling for quite some time that all of the road construction is designed to prevent escape. I don't know from what or why it comes to me like that, but the feeling is consistent. If anything happened in this country and people needed to be able to move quickly out of their area, there would be a big problem. Roads are closed everywhere. And this is either very poor planning or a cheap attempt to be able to point to road construction and say, see, we are fixing the roads, so vote for us. Or a deliberate plan to prevent escape from some situation being deliberately set up. So heads up, pay attention, know your area and what's open and what's closed. Number 2, the Associated Press says that there's a shortage of organs for transplant. Could this mean that there's been at least some interruption in the flow of organs taken from unwilling donors, such as Falun Gong, or the breeding of children for the express purpose of taking their organs? Such an interruption would be good news. Why is there such a big need for transplant organs? I'm always disturbed that so much of our economy is based on poor health. So let's focus on restoring our health and vitality over the next 6 months, because that's how long it takes at the very least, and even longer if you have a serious condition to reverse. Just start. You'll be surprised at what you can accomplish. Number 3. Japan looks like it's entering into crisis mode. And actually, I was seeing this at the beginning of August. And then there was that flash crash on August 5th. But this looks like it will continue to the point that some people in Japan begin talking about becoming part of Russia or China or Korea or the Philippines or something, anything or anyone other than being associated with the United States, which is how things have been since the end of World War II. The Japanese people are feeling quite vulnerable and are looking for strength and what I'm going to call like national maturity, like what you see in India and Russia. Those are old cultures. Amazing, beautiful, stable cultures. So Japan is an ancient culture, but they had a serious setback in World War II. And now they're between a rock and a hard place and having to decide whether or not they're going to get out from under U.S. control or let things drift along and hope that the U.S. just goes away. Number 4. Did you see that the president of Smartmatic was indicted? Is this a real move toward fixing the election problems or another ploy to make us believe the system is still working and we should participate by voting? Number 5. I've long noted that the behaviors and attitudes of the people at the top of the power heap have a tendency to trickle down into the general population. The money never trickles down, but the attitudes and the behaviors do. Back in the days when corporations and governments saw themselves as the paternal uncle, taking care of their population, that same paternal caring attitude could be found among the people. We took care of one another. Neighbors watched over all of the children in the neighborhood and the town, not just their own. Families played the role of banker for the young people just getting started. They played the role of social worker for those who needed support. And they acted as a sort of court system for the black sheep, doing so with some pretty tough love. That attitude of paternal care gradually died out. The dying process was obvious to me by the time George W. Bush, Bush the Younger, was running for president. In my eyes, Joe Biden was not the first presidential candidate to campaign from the basement. It was Bush the Younger. There were so many things Bush didn't show up for during that presidential campaign. And soon it was evident that he was not concerned at all about losing. He knew it was in the bag, and his attitude was cavalier and shallow. In the first months after his inauguration, Bush began gutting the government by privatizing many things. Corporations began taking over what used to be government services. Those big corporations were only interested in the bottom line, not in being of service. And they wanted to get control of the billions of dollars sitting in government accounts. When September 11th occurred, everything was shut down, and we were then told, don't worry, go shopping. 9/11 was followed by the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the Patriot Act that took away many of our rights. And at the same time, there was a surreptitious effort to replace judges in many courts, judges that would rule in favor of business. There was also an increase in tort laws, which are laws that favor business and not the people. Tort laws make it almost pointless to sue for justice because everything is stacked against us. So what was the subtle message being communicated to the American people during all of this? It was that we don't matter. This attitude trickled down into the populace, and slowly but surely, frustration rose, and then fear, and now anger. Anger shows up everywhere, in road rage, in a willingness to lie, cheat, and steal, even kill. How do we stop this trickle-down effect? How do we heal the divisions between and among us? Can we even begin to do so when the current attitude trickling down is one of massive divisions in our governance system and the threat of a massive failure of our financial system on top of that? So, steady as she goes, my friends. Let your allegiance be with your heart. Hang on to your goodness and don't copy the problem children running things. Number 6. Let's talk about the human for just a moment and how we are built and wired. Let's start with the brain. The brain only registers 2 conditions, love or fear. That's all we're wired for. Every single thing we feel is a version of either love or fear. There are all sorts of variations of each condition, but everything we do arises from either love or fear. One is positive, the other negative. The positive response is meant to teach you to move toward it. That negative response, that's meant to teach you to move away from it, away from irritation, discomfort, fear, and anger. We in the West are caught in the negative cycle. We have degenerated into anger, and now we are seeing rage pop up here and there. Recently, we slid into temporary insanity territory during the thing in the arm pandemic. What is the definition of insanity? And temporary insanity is the end stage after rage. So, what's the definition of insanity? It is, quite simply, an inability to perceive reality correctly. Insanity actually has two phases or types. The first is the failure to perceive reality correctly. The second and more dangerous phase is action taken in blind panic in an attempt to prevent harm to yourself. In the case of that last pandemic, the mass of the population failed to perceive what was really happening. And then they acted in blind panic, thinking they would prevent harm to themselves. However, the failure to see behind the shallow subterfuge being presented as reality, and then to act in blind panic, was a fatal mistake for some. Instead of protecting themselves from an attacker, they ended up attacking themselves. There are plenty of signs the powers that want to be are setting up another test of our sanity with monkeypox. Let's not make the same mistakes again. Number 7. I don't see signs that we have a government we can trust. I don't see signs that they care about us. And I don't mean that we need a government to take care of us. I mean that they aren't listening to us. They don't care what we want or need. The governments in Washington, D.C., Paris, London, Italy, Germany, and elsewhere are governments that belong to us. We put them in power. We pay them to work for us. We try to honor the decisions they make. We pay the bills they generate. And the bottom line is that I don't see a positive or cooperative or forward-thinking or even intelligent kind of action from anyone at the top. If we don't see some good, sensible, practical action soon, we will have to make some very big decisions. Number 8. If you have ever wondered why big businesses are so interested in getting their hands on all of your data, it's because they are putting together a whole new way of setting prices. You've probably already experienced some of this when you do a bit of research before buying something. You go to a website to look at something, you know the price and the terms, and then you move to another site where another company is selling the same thing, and you research their terms and prices. Maybe you do that several times before coming back to one of the earlier sites because they had the best price. But when you go back to that site, you discover the item costs more than when you first visited. Why? Partly because companies want you to buy quickly. They'll put up a buy now button without looking any further. They don't want you to do any comparison shopping. So if you leave and then return, the price has gone up as punishment for not buying on your first visit. Now, there's something new coming called surveillance pricing. This is pricing that is based on your age, your income, your address, your lifestyle, your buying patterns, and all the other information that companies have been collecting. Artificial intelligence is now putting all of that information together with your name and computer IP address, allowing a company to charge higher prices if you make more money. I don't know what the sliding scale would be, but supposedly, they say, those with a lower income would be charged less. Everyone with a higher income would be charged more. Everyone would pay a different price. and nobody would know what anybody else paid. This whole thing just strikes me as not really workable. And it could also lead to some very messy and unexpected results. Traditionally, the market sets fair market prices based on supply and demand. Where the supply and demand curve cross, that crossing point is considered to be the fair market value. But how do you set a fair market price when the market shatters into 350 million personal markets, and each person becomes a market of one individual? Those pushing surveillance pricing say, well, if you don't like the price, you can negotiate for a better deal. But since a great deal of shopping now occurs online, how do you go about haggling over price when there's no person on the other side of the transaction? Only a computer program. If surveillance of people's lives continues to broaden and deepen, it's certain that personal emergencies and the need to get something quickly will be known because of the surveillance. And this could mean sky-high prices for people who are desperate to buy something because they are experiencing personal emergencies. It could also mean higher prices for items known to be purchased during personal emergencies. Surveillance pricing could also lead to the creation of alternate identities, hidden identities, or incognito identities, all in an attempt to get lower prices. In effect, we would be trying to get better prices by wearing a mask to hide our identity, just like our government officials are doing. Some more trickle down there. There might also be the development of individual buyers who maintain an ever-changing series of poor or low-income profiles and who then buy for others at lower prices, a sort of Costco in reverse. The bottom line in this is that capitalism is based on competition, and competition keeps prices low. Eliminating competition by compartmentalizing pricing is likely to cripple capitalism and cause the entire market system to become dysfunctional. The result would be the development of an alternate system operating totally outside the confines of the market now in place. In addition, people like to deal with people, not computers. And replacing the face-to-face contact with others will only go so far before new reasons for and ways of finding and working with others starts popping up. So I'll close this comment by saying that surveillance pricing may turn out to be a step too far. Humans improve themselves, their performance, their culture, and the entire civilization by sort of measuring themselves in the light of what others are doing and then trying to do better, make something better, and make their lives more special. This flows out into the population, and little by little, we evolve because of the contributions of millions of people, each contributing something good while trying to make the world better for themselves. It makes the world better for all. Surveillance pricing strikes me as further dividing and isolating us. It is as if the system is trying to squeeze every darn dime possible out of everyone. The cautionary tale to be told here is that every system that tries to take advantage of people sows the seeds of its own destruction. Number 9. Russia has announced a de facto declaration of war against the U.S. No one is saying anything about this, and we continue to poke the bear. Number 10. I thought I'd share a rumor. Okay, a rumor that Xi Jinping has been sidelined in China. I don't know if it's true or partially true or if it's pure gossip, but I have long had the intuitive impression that Trump, Putin, and Xi were working together to release the planet from the clutches of a corrupt hierarchy. So I've been watching for signs that the cabal is trying to take them out. Their attempt to remove Trump failed last month. There are rumors and predictions that Putin will not be with us by the end of the year. And now there is this rumor about Xi being under house arrest. According to the rumor, Xi had a stroke. And for now, he will continue to be the face of China while some massive reorganizing is going on in the background. Then he will be replaced. Way back in the days of dealing with the little men in brown robes, I saw that China broke up after waves of silent revolution. If Trump, Putin, and Xi are trying to end the cabal, we can rest assured that the cabal will be trying to end them. If we lose one of the three, we might be in trouble. I say that because although the media has done a hatchet job on all of them, what I see is that each is trying to hang on to their nation, boost their nation's place in the world, and counter the corruption that is endemic to nations because of the ease with which power can be purchased and manipulated. The problem is that each of these three leaders has serious shortcomings. Trump is bombastic, Xi is controlling, and Putin has got himself in much deeper than he wanted due to failure to assess the enemy correctly. All three are up against some very powerful oligarchs who control the finances of the world. So let me say this again. One of our biggest lessons will be having to answer the question, why did we allow a few men to get control of all the money while leaving billions of people to struggle? And how do we fix this? Can we fix this? Think about that. Number 11. I recently did a piece on my Patreon channel about a Radiolab program. Oh my gosh, let me encourage everyone, again, to go and listen to it because it is an excellent example of how our U.S. Constitution is being stretched, distorted, and used against us. I cannot emphasize enough the danger of what has been done in the name of the Constitution. Briefly, there is something called the Commerce Clause in the Constitution that gives Congress the right to manage interstate business. People involved in interstate business have to follow certain rules, and the goal of those rules is to prevent depressions, recessions, financial panics, and things of that sort. Anyway, locally owned and small businesses are to be left alone. However, people running their own small businesses have been prosecuted and fined under the Interstate Commerce Clause because something they purchased came from people engaged in interstate commerce. That's quite a stretch. Other business owners have been prosecuted and fined for not purchasing goods from those engaged in interstate commerce. And the claim was that by not buying those goods, the business was negatively affecting interstate commerce. While we can say that it's a huge stretch of government power to prosecute and fine local business owners for buying something controlled by interstate commerce, the extension of prosecution for not buying something is a move into the complete and total control of everything we do. This leaves us vulnerable to prosecution if we refuse to participate in a New World Order government, a financial system, food and supply system, or whatever that system might be offering. So go listen to the Radio Lab program. Number 12. Let's step back a little and look at the reactions to someone shooting at Trump, the lone shooter story, the terrible death of someone attending the rally, the media headlines that tried to downplay the event as a nothing burger, and the relatively quiet manner in which all of this was received by the American people. No one started a riot. No one started a parade to protest the shooting. And there have been no marches, buildings burned down, storefronts destroyed, parts of a city taken over in response to the shooting. I can't help but think that most people, are neither fooled nor subject to manipulation any longer. This is remarkable. Truly, something has changed. People are just watching. Number 13. I keep seeing big changes that come up all at once and in a tangled way. These are financial changes, war, and geophysical changes, like an earthquake or a tsunami. In truth, I tend to think of each of these changes as an earthquake in itself, a financial earthquake, a war earthquake, and a string of deliberate earthquakes that move and shake the land rather seriously, caused by the powers that want to be if they can't get a war started. So maybe I was just seeing Japan's recent earthquake, and maybe the quakes are only symbolic of big changes, but either way, you should be ready and ready to help others if you can. Number 14. Since January, I have been saying that I don't see any election this November. The reason seemed to be that there were no candidates. It looked like Joe Biden, or the guy playing him, was gone. And so was Donald Trump. Since that looks to me like such an unlikely scenario, I've continued to watch, looking for any sign of change. If Donald Trump ends up in jail and Joe Biden is unfit or dead, where does that leave us? Think about that. We are encountering so many situations that require us to be creative, insightful, and remain ready for the unexpected. Number 15. Finally, I'll close with this. I had a request from someone to give an update on a video I did about a year ago. The video was titled Kundalini, Individual, National, and the Awakening of Consciousness. The essence of that video was, first, what causes an awakening of consciousness, and what are the stages of unfolding that follow? And then, what are the turning points? So I didn't think I had much of an update to offer, but then two things happened. One was that I began to sense a very subtle shift in the energies of the people in the U.S. and even in the West, and the other was a dream. So that first thing, the subtle shift, was a perceptual shift towards something I can only characterize as good. I don't know if the shift was caused by people like suddenly making up their minds about something, or if we are just becoming bored with the whole drama that has been shoved at us over the past few years, or what. Something's different. But what I sensed was a quieting down. It was as if people were more aware and still watching, but something had been decided. Maybe some kind of determination had been moved into place, or people were feeling more capable in some way. Anyway, I noted this for a couple of days, but I didn't really delve into it other than to wonder briefly, I wonder what's changed. Then, after wondering what had changed, I had a dream. All I can remember about the first part of the dream was that I was struggling with something, some problem. And then the scene shifted, and I was in the hayloft with several people. I noticed that a bird had gotten in between the floorboards of 2 floors, and it was fluttering around, desperately trying to get out. I reached in between the floorboards, and I managed to grab it by enclosing it with both hands. But when I pulled my hands out and was going to let it go, it turned out to be a mouse. The mouse had bitten ever so slightly into the side of my left palm, and when I opened my hands, it hung on to my left hand by its teeth and to my right hand using its hind legs, which were spread-eagled out in the effort to hang on. I exclaimed something like, "OMG, it's a mouse." And then I just looked at it for a minute. It seemed rigidly stretched almost to the maximum between 2 hands. And for a moment, I wasn't sure if it was a mouse or a rat. But after a minute or so of looking closely at it, I decided to take it outside. I went out into the yard. It had rained recently, and there was a big puddle of water near the porch. My cat, I have a black cat named Abracadabra. My cat, Abracadabra, a cow, a dog, and a lion were sitting around the puddle. I put the mouse down on the edge of the puddle and fully expected the cat to pounce on it. However, I was greatly surprised to see Abby walk through the puddle to the mouse and sniff at it and then lick it very gently. The cow didn't do anything noticeable, but the lion leaned over and nudged the mouse as if it were trying to get the mouse's attention and tell it something. They were nose to nose for a minute. I had the feeling something telepathic was going on there. But the lion was offering a bit of support. The dog came and stood guard protectively over the mouse, while Abby continued to lick the mouse as if it were one of her kittens. I was so surprised, I just stood there and stared at them. The feeling was one of watching a situation have a completely different outcome than I had expected. Instead of predatory behavior, death, and destruction, it was as if love, communication, cooperation, and other wonderful changes had taken place. I woke. On waking, I analyzed the dream and saw that it had a powerful message. Birds symbolize the spirit of a person or a group. And the bird stuck between the 2 floors represents the spirit of the people trying to move to a higher level, the next floor up, so to speak. When I pulled the bird out to set it free and it suddenly became a mouse symbolizes being timid, quiet, afraid to face something or someone. The recent rain and the puddle symbolize big emotions and tears, and the animals gathered around it represent the effort to come together to deal with those tears and emotions. When I took the mouse outside and set it down, expecting it would be devoured by the cat, not only did the cat take care of the mouse, so did the other animals around the puddle. Now, the cat is the symbol, the universal symbol of consciousness. And walking through the puddle indicates that consciousness has had to walk the path of tears recently. The dog is the universal symbol of intuition, guiding and protecting us. The cow is a symbol of wealth and plenty, but the cow didn't move or change, hinting that we may be able to maintain a reasonable way of life as we go forward. The lion symbolizes power. All big cats symbolize big consciousness because that's where big power resides. But the lion also symbolizes power structures, and it points to both our need to use our power as well as to face the power structures currently running our lives. The lion's effort to nudge the mouse and communicate something represents the need to recognize our power and use it wisely. The fact is that all of these came together in love, communication, and cooperation. And this signals that something has changed, something good. So in the look-see of last November 2023, I talked about the move from the 3D timeline to a 4D timeline. So now I'm wondering if what I'm picking up regarding a subtle shift is being backed up by the dream that hints at the possibility that we were stuck between two floors, representing being stuck between third and fourth dimensions. But we've either broken free or enough of us have solidified our consciousness at a 4D level to move on to the 4D timeline more fully. It may look as if not much has changed on the outside, but people have changed on the inside. The attitude seems to be that whatever comes, we'll deal with it. This may include anything from financial difficulties to wars to collapsing governments. People are ready for whatever may happen. And this readiness has the power to change things and provide an anchor in times that require resilience. Well, let's hang on to that anchor and that resilience. And that's it for this look-see. There's so much more I could have said, but it's getting too long. So for those who are watching or listening for the first time, the look-see is a brief look at what's happening in our world and where the big trends are headed. Reality is not fixed. It is very dynamic, and it changes according to what we are doing with our consciousness. Nothing becomes real until we make it real. We make a choice, we take some kind of action, we put something together or we take it apart. Those decisive actions are what determine the path and the outcome. And of course, once we set something in motion, it takes a lot to make a change or get things going in another direction. And that's exactly the reason for looking ahead. If we don't like the direction things are going, we can make appropriate changes in a timely way or prepare for what may look inevitable. If we see something we like, we can put some conscious attention on that outcome and help things along. So before I get too far off track, I'll just say it's important to look ahead and assess what's happening and where we are going, so we know whether or not we need to do something different. Thank you so much for listening. And over this next month, don't forget to listen to yourself. Have a great month.